Hi all, this is a Manhattanite for SNGmentors.com. This is typical of a hand history that's posted on our forums, and just want to, it's sort of an interesting one and a spot that comes up, sort of fairly often with players. So I figured I'd do a really quick video about it. This is the Hot 11. I assume it was today. I think one of our players have already won this. So he wants to know if he should fold or reship this spot. He writes, okay, so there are about 45 players left, $7,000 for first. Got moved to this table 5 hands ago, been pretty quiet. Not many hands on my opponent. I'm like 6 of 45 in the tournament, is what he's saying. It folds a small blind. He's a losing player, minus 8K over 2K sample size, and he min raises. I decide to 3-bet shove, or I shouldn't say what he decided to do, but should he 3-bet shove or not is the question, really. He did 3-bet shove, so I guess it's he's given that part away, but what should he do? I'm wondering how many people would actually do this really often, or prefer to wait and preserve their 25 big blind stack. Just put it to use instead if your villain is somewhat if your villain if you're the villain, what would your min raise calling range be? So, I mean, if I'm the villain, my min raise range is very wide. My calling range is obviously significantly tighter than my calling range. So, the villain in this hand has what does he have? 328,000 chips, and we have 435,000 chips. So we have him out chipped by about 100,000 chips. And the blinds are 17,000, and the antes are 8,500. So there's I didn't put it into the replayer, but there is a significant amount of chips in the pot. So the villain in this hand min raises, which we have to assign him a fairly wide range. So I didn't put it into the replayer. I did put it into single whiz instead, and this is the hand in single whiz. And what should we do? So on the face of it, it's at an NL full ring table. We could change this to a 180 man, but it's not gonna. You can see it doesn't change anything substantially. A little bit because it's dollar EV, but we also really want to be in chip EV mode still, because there's no dollar EV yet in this tournament. Whether we finish 45th, 25th, or 13th is barely a significant difference in our day, where we're playing for first and only first. So the question is this really more of a chip EV call than a dollar EV spot? So he raises. I don't see why the stack here. Maybe I mentioned the wrong player before. The stack here is only 240,000. So right then and there, his did I look at the wrong player? I did. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. It was right above, or maybe I just missed it. So he had 280,000. We have 435,000. So right away, we have to give him a slightly looser calling range if he's going to min raise. He may min raise just as wide. He may even actually call just as wide. We also may have to weight his min raise, since we really don't know him yet, more towards sort of the higher end, not the lower end. Now, single whiz gives him as a default ace 4, suited ace 8, and down to 3s. We pretty much can assume that this same player is really raising at least 23%, which is any ace, and down to king 9 suited, and that's sort of a typical range. Is he raising more? Typically I like to think that players raise in this spot any Broadway cards, but the question is he really? And I'm thinking that those hands are more maybe shoving ranges. We don't have that much information on this player, so I'm going to weight it so it's a little bit towards the higher end. I'm actually going to put it on 20%. Now, normally I would put it much wider. We don't have any information on this player, how he plays. So I'm going to have his raising range. I'm actually going to include ace deuce or pocket twos. It's kind of hard to do that. So I want to include pocket twos, which I think is fair. We can even include any ace. This is raising range. So let's have this at 22%. 22.5% is his raising range. It's not going to make a big difference in the math. So the fact is if he's raising that range, what is he calling with? We know he's a bad player. So we assume he's not calling any two, but we do assume he's calling wide. And I'm going to give him, ace-5 suited maybe. And it sort of shows you here that this is probably going to be a fold. And this is because we're using a few assumptions here. He's not a good player. We don't know, though, bad players can be too tight, they can be too loose. Usually they're too loose. So we're going to give him sort of a loose, committed calling range in the hand. And I think we sort of can give him this 12.5%. Now, quite often I'll assign tighter ranges than this to players. And I'll actually assign wider min-raise ranges. But in this case, I think that he shoves a lot of hands that that would typically be min raises. Like I think he probably shoves the queen jacks and the king tens and those hands. So I think we can take those out of the min raise range. We might even be able to tighten up his. We might even be able to tighten up his min raise range considerably. But we don't have that read that, like, if we think he's shoving. And this is the wrong one. We want to do it here. If we think he's shoving, a large range, then his min raise range is going to be sort of tighter. Maybe it's polarized a little bit, but generally speaking, it's going to be tighter. And his shoving range is going to include all that garbage that would typically be min raised. So I actually think that until we know better, this is a spot that we could give up. We want to have another round with him, and if he pulls us the next round, then we sort of have that information, and we know, of course, the next round he probably has aces and he's doing it, so we're fucked. Anyway, just sort of an interesting hand for the forum. This is Manhattanite for SNGmentors.com. We are generally the leading staking coaching site for sit-and-goes and then multis. That at least I know about. So talk to you all later.